Hello there, my name's Nick and I'm the latest in a long line of golfers who thought it'd be a good idea to start a golf channel. So, welcome to Classic Golf Clubs. It might not be the best time to start a golf channel as we're in the middle of lockdown in England, which is where I live, but on the good news front we do have a date for resumption of play on the 29th of March. The channel will appeal to anybody that's interested in golf's rich history. First and foremost, we'll be looking at old clubs and taking them out on the course, playing a few holes with them and seeing how we get on. But we'll also find time to look at the game's history, its traditions, some of the great players from the past, anything I fancy really, or anything that you fancy as the viewers, if you care to let me know what that might be. Over recent years, there have been quite a few of the golf channels dipping their toes into the vintage or classic clubs area. Perhaps comparing an old Persimmon driver against one of today's high-tech marvels, or maybe looking at a 1970s Balata ball and seeing how that compares against a modern golf ball. But the normal reaction when picking up these old clubs is to sort of say, good grief, how did anybody ever manage to play around a golf with these? But in all honesty, they're not that difficult. And if I, as an average 16 handicap player, can manage to get round the course using them, then I don't see why anybody else shouldn't either. And that will be the format of most of the videos. We'll take a look at some old clubs or some other aspects of the game, and then we'll go out on the course and play 3 or 4 holes to see how we get on. Try and dispel that myth that only the best ball strikers can play with these clubs. One of the more frequently asked questions when we're looking at older clubs is what makes a classic or vintage club? Are there set dates? Questions such as that. The short answer is that there isn't a strict definition. There are 1 or 2 broadly recognised features or dates for clubs, but there's nothing written down in stone. There are 2 main categories which I describe as hickory and classic clubs. And we can look at those 2 categories in turn, starting with hickory clubs. Hickory clubs are wooden shafted clubs in reality. Hickory was used pretty much exclusively from the middle of the 19th century. It was found to be the ideal wood for shafts, had a nice stiffness and made a great feeling shaft for the clubs. Let's have a look at a hickory golf club so we can see what we're talking about. This is a club that's known as a niblick. All of the old clubs had names then rather than numbers, much more romantic time. You can see there written on the back, if I hold it the right way up, it says that it's a niblick. Have I got that the right way up? Yes, I have. So we can see that's a niblick. It's roughly about 52 degrees, so the equivalent of the gap wedge of today. You can see it's got a very thin sole. So if you catch this one a little heavy, you're going to take a big divot with it. The shaft itself, hickory wood shaft, and we've got a grip on the end there. It's been re-gripped with a leather wrap grip with the suede side, if you like, on the outside, which is how a lot of players prefer them. It gives you a better hold on the club. So that's a hickory shafted club. This one dates to about 1930. And that brings us on to classic clubs, which are a little bit harder to define. But I think most collectors would agree that the period for classic clubs starts at the end of the Second World War, so about 1945, and carries on until the demise of Persimmon, which really happened about 1990. So that gives us 1945 to 1990. As for the clubs themselves, I think most people would agree that the woods need to be made of wood. That can be either Persimmon wood or laminated maple, which is commoner in the UK. And the irons themselves, most people would say that they should be a blade. These were exclusively what was available up until the sort of early 1970s when we started to see cavity backs appearing. Some people do really like the cavity backs, and there are strong collectors for the early ping irons, for instance. But generally, an often heard term would be Persimmon and blades for collectors of classic clubs. But as I say, there aren't any set definitions, so just use whatever takes your fancy, really. And just as a side note, the last major to be won using a Persimmon driver was the 1993 Masters, which was won by Bernard Langer, who was using a Wood Brothers driver. Wood Brothers is a make not very often encountered in the UK, but they made some extremely good quality clubs. So that's hickory clubs, taking us up to 1935, and classic clubs roughly defined as 1945 to 1990. But the astute among you will have spotted a gap there before 1945 and the end of the hickory era. I'm talking about the early steel shafted clubs, so late 1920s up until 1945. This is a very neglected area, which is a bit of a tragedy really, because there are some very nice clubs here and a lot of innovation was going on. But rest assured, it's an area that we will be covering here on Classic Golf Clubs. And to prove that, I've got an example of a club to show you here. This is a Ben Sayers Par X club. We can see Ben Sayers' name there and a little bird, which is his mark. And if we look at the face, we can see it's a line face club, and hopefully there you can see the club model name, Par X. I can catch that in the light. I don't know whether that's working. It seems to be focusing on my head. And this is a steel shaft, a coated shaft, so it's a brown finish. They did come in other colours. Light brown was very commonly used, because when these first came out, there was a bit of a sort of a reaction. People wanted to see hickory shafts, so they were often coated using a material called pyrotone to make them look like hickory shafts. And on the end, we've got a leather wrap grip with a nice end cap on the end there, just to finish it off. So, very attractive club in my opinion, and it's a great pity that nobody seems interested in these. Well, I hope you're still with us and I've not bored you out of your mind yet. But I think now will be a good time to answer a question that's often asked, and that is, what is a persimmon wood? It's a bit of a catch-all name really for any wooden wood, but there are two types of woods that we encounter in the UK in particular, and they are persimmon. Persimmon is a tree. I think we've got a picture coming up which will interest the horticulturally minded, and laminated is the other type, and as the name suggests, this is made up of layers of wood, normally maple wood, which are glued and compressed together to make a very durable block, and this can also be waterproofed to make it resilient to the British weather as well. A big consideration. So let's have a look at these two types of club and see if we can point out the differentiating features. Before I move on, I'll just add, in terms of playing the two clubs, persimmon and laminated, there's not really a lot of difference between them. They feel very similar, they sound very similar, but I think all collectors would agree that persimmon is the preferred option. It's a finer quality and it just looks better. Right, well, I've waffled on for far too long. It's time to go and hit a few shots. But as I said at the start, we're currently in lockdown. Boo! So the best I can do is to roll a few putts on the carpet. And for that, I'm going to need a classic putter. So what better than a John Letter's Golden Goose, probably one of the classic UK putters. Okay, very short putt here, but all the time on lockdown, it's probably as much as I can manage. So let's have a go at this. There we are. I'm not going to do any better than that, so I'll stop there. Oh, sorry. Just been reading an old magazine. These are great sources of information and often have very interesting articles. I'll sign off in the time-honoured YouTube fashion by asking you to press the subscribe button and ring the bell if you want to get notification of when the next video is released. I'll only be doing these every 2 or 3 weeks, so it's a good idea to do that. And I'll just say thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again for the next one.